Ladies and gentlemen, very respected publication, The Independent, CIA Director John Ratcliffe suggests Hillary Clinton could face criminal prosecution as part of Obama Russiagate investigation. It's taking place, ladies and gentlemen. John Brennan is about to get indicted. Once that happens, you have Comey, Brennan, you have Strzok, Page, and others already subpoenaed to the grand jury for Brennan. All roads lead to Madam Secretary. She funded the Steele dossier. Everyone involved in the Steele dossier will face criminal prosecution, indictment. Hit subscribe to the channel right now. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right after this. People are watching that, thank God. It's growing. We're almost at 20,000 subs. And go there right after this, H.A. Goodman's other channel, for a synopsis of this live stream. It's taking place. It's 10 years. The indictments are imminent, actually, right now, if you remember that. If you remember that, God bless you, love you. Have a great, wonderful, safe Sunday. This is taking place this week, at least the Brennan indictment, which leads directly to Hillary Clinton. To my super chat, thank you. Let's go.
Federal grand jury has subpoenaed 3 high-ranking Obama-era officials because, of course, when you're a communist, spying on your enemies and having secret police is all part of the deal. And so the Justice Department is now, under Donald Trump, investigating, and they have the Trump-Russia probe.
Sources telling Fox News more subpoenas are on the way. Chinley Painter here with the latest details. Good morning, Chinley.
Hey, guys. So law enforcement sources to Fox News Digital say that up to 30 subpoenas related to the probe will be issued in the coming days. It's all part of the Justice Department's investigation into the origins of the Trump-Russia probe. We know
that's essentially 30 people who possibly risk criminal indictment, including the individuals on the screen. Not myself, but potentially, well, definitely Brennan, potentially Strzok, potentially Page.
a federal grand jury has subpoenaed former CIA Director John Brennan and former FBI officials Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. The Brennan investigation came after CIA Director John Ratcliffe this summer declassified a new lessons learned review that determined the CIA, FBI, and National Security Agency's Intelligence Community Assessment, or the ICA, examining Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election deviated from intelligence standards that led to some, quote, procedural anomalies. And records also declassified further revealed that Brennan pushed for the Steele dossier, a discredited anti-Trump document, to be included in that 2017 ICA, even though he testified differently to the House Judiciary Committee in May 2023. Here is Brennan commenting in July about the FBI criminal investigation.
I'm really shocked that, individuals who are willing to sacrifice their reputations, their credibility, their decency to continue to do Donald Trump's bidding on something that clearly is just politically based.
As far as Strzok and Page, they first came under scrutiny in 2018 when the Justice Department uncovered a series of anti-Trump text messages between them. Both were assigned to work on special counsel Robert Mueller's team in 2017. And Strzok, he's the FBI agent who in July 2016 opened the FBI's initial Russia investigation. Guys?
All right. Chandler, thank you very much. And, it's so important to keep in mind that the biggest fracture of the, we talk about constitutional crises. The biggest fracture, I think, in our lifetime was when the Obama administration decided at the height of a presidential campaign that they were going to launch a federal investigation into the campaign, into their opponent, their leading opponent.
And they did so because of the Steele dossier purchased by Clinton and the DNC with campaign funds. They paid a Federal Election Commission fine. Everyone involved with the Steele dossier, including Madam Secretary, will ultimately get indicted.
And everything that has happened since then is downstream from that decision. And it was a decision made in the Oval Office by Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and all of those characters.
Yeah. And it had such a pernicious effect because then January 6th came and they thought, oh, now we've got this new January 6th. Oh, and then they tapped into the phones of over 160 members of Congress.
And now we're finding out that, there were people employed, let's see, how do I say this? There were people employed by the U.S. government, we're finding out, to allegedly pretend to commit crimes so they could be filmed. This is according to public record. Oh, the potential. Sorry, there's the potential that somebody who worked for the government had a training exercise to pretend that the individual was trying to do something criminal, which media utilized to paint all Trump supporters as evil.
We're looking at Operation Arctic Frost, and they're trying to dig into that as well. But you're right, this weaponization of government, this very communist idea of I'm going to use intel agencies that are meant to capture terrorists to go after my own political opponents. And I'm going to use the government to take down a president who was duly elected and concoct this whole Russia collusion thing, which, by the way, also had really weird implications on our foreign policy, because all of a sudden the president couldn't deal with Russia in any normal way because he was being accused of having won because of Russia. This thing was so toxic, and it all starts with Obama. When you look at Mandani winning here in New York City as a communist, don't think about Mandani. Think about Obama. Everything bad that's happened. Go back to Obama.
Well, it's actually who purchased the dossier during President Obama's administration. So they're 100% right. President Obama, I do think, is actually, he faces criminal liability, but I think he's actually helping President Trump to circumvent criminal liability, number one. And they're part of a club of 47 presidents, number two, but mainly to take over the Democratic Party completely without the I'm with her crowd. So President Obama, all of them will blame President Obama. The problem, however, is that CIA director suggests Hillary Clinton could face criminal prosecution. That's almost certainly going to take place. That will take place. And Brennan, all of them are getting indicted because of the dossier. The dossier was purchased by Clinton. Check this out.
The White House says Hillary Clinton's campaign financed the Russia hoax. Watch.
This should be a story every outlet in this room should be covering. This is further evidence that Hillary Clinton approved the Russia hoax against President Trump. Her campaign financed it. Again, she approved it. And the FBI and the CIA were both weaponized to, as our director of CIA has said, accelerate this hoax against then candidate and former President Trump. To answer the heart of your question, the president wants to see justice served, and he trusts the Attorney General and the Department of Justice to implement that justice and hold these people accountable.
When BuzzFeed published the Steele dossier, that was one of the most egregious, unethical examples of quote-unquote journalism in the history of the country. That opened the floodgates for other publications to then publish the Steele dossier. That then essentially poisoned the airwaves and the news cycle, allowing, influencing judges when they were signing off on FISA warrants, for example. They would then say, well, it's public record. All of this is public record. The public record was influenced by a deliberate campaign to paint Trump and Russia, to paint Trump as colluding with Russia, which, by the way, John Brennan is going to get indicted for because his senior officials, he overruled his senior officials at the CIA. There was no evidence that Trump or that Russia wanted Trump ever. If anything, the Clinton campaign and the DNC and in their own emails, we know from The Guardian, from the New York Times, the Washington Post, WikiLeaks, published the emails. They wanted President Trump. How could the Russians and Clinton's campaign both want Trump at the same time? The whole thing was so absurd. Then they lost, then they blamed Trump, and you have about 100 people involved, either directly or indirectly. You have 30 or 40 directly involved in the Steele dossier, and all of them will face indictment.
Florida Congressman Byron Donalds joins me now. Congressman, surely there will be a full-scale investigation of this. That's what you would expect, right?
Absolutely. There needs to be a full-scale investigation. With respect to the Hillary Clinton campaign paying for the Steele dossier and other elements, in the Financial Services Committee, we had a former SEC Commissioner Gary Gensler in committee. And I questioned Mr. Gensler about this very fact, about did he sign off on the checks that paid for the Steele dossier that we now know without any shadow of a doubt was false, a false narrative, concocted materials and evidence for the entire purpose of spying on President Trump's campaign in 2016 and starting this Russia probe, which was, in my view, the real thing that was destroying our democracy. And that's the Democrats, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, wanting so desperately to defeat Donald Trump that they were using the intelligence community, laundering phony intelligence, and their Hillary Clinton campaign paying for it. And so, yes, it needs to be investigated much more broadly.
I should tell our audience that Fox Business reached out to Hillary Clinton's team for a response to the story. We have not heard back from that team at this point. Congressman, Biden's longtime aide, Mike Donovan, he just testified in the Biden probe. He says...
So initially, all of this started the past couple of months by President Trump saying, hey, this is President Obama that started this. That's the art of the deal. He is doing exactly what he needs to kind of say, okay, President Obama, look, help me out, and you will circumvent all criminal liability. So President Obama is almost certainly helping President Trump indict Hillary, John Brennan, Comey, all these people under conspiracy statutes. So they not only lied under oath like Comey and then Brennan, but there are also conspiracy statutes that a grand jury is looking at, possibly numerous grand juries, RICO charges, conspiracy statutes. This was an organized effort, and they didn't need a memo saying, okay, I'll do this, I'll do that. Let's set up Trump. They all set up Trump and framed Trump utilizing a dossier purchased by Clinton. That's what started it. Then you have text messages saying we'll stop Trump and all of that. The declassified documents in the Durham Probe Annex, but also the ODNI report, show a massive effort by a number of people to conspire against President Trump, utilizing government bureaucracy. They utilized the government to go after Trump, and it was at the behest of Madam Secretary. Check this out.
Has been caught directly. So people say, oh, you know, a group. It's not a group. It's Obama. His orders are on the paper. The papers are signed. The papers.
But President Trump is saying this. It's brilliant. He knows that there's not just a group. There's probably 100 people. There's 30 subpoenas just for Brennan. So do the math on that. And he knows that President Obama will be blamed. James Clapper already blamed him. Hillary Clinton will blame President Obama. All of them will blame Obama. So President Obama circumvents criminal liability by helping President Trump. Somehow, some way, a phone call through a liaison, helping Ratcliffe and Kash Patel find the documents they need, which were in burn bags. So they tried to obstruct justice. Anyway, let's continue.
Came right out of their office. They sent everything to be highly classified. Well, the highly classified's been released. And what they did in 2016 and in 2020 is very criminal. It's criminal at the highest level.
President Trump today calling out former President Obama after DNI Tulsi Gabbard sent a criminal referral to the DOJ related to her claims that Obama-era officials manufactured and politicized intelligence to create the Russia collusion narrative in 2016. Intelligence that those officials have said they had great confidence in.
John Brennan and Jim Comey and I are part of the group that were tasked by President Obama to put together all the reporting we had on the Russian interference.
He was already blaming Obama in 2019. Hit subscribe if you're new. This is the moment, ladies and gentlemen. This is the moment. This is one of the first moments in U.S. history where President Obama is blamed for criminal activity. There's a zero chance that President Obama is going to be indicted. Zero. There's a 99.9% chance that Hillary Clinton, John Brennan, Comey, and others will be indicted. 99.999%, virtually a 100% chance that they'll all be indicted for a criminal conspiracy against Trump. James Clapper is lying here. He wasn't just tasked by President Obama. It was a political effort that they all engaged in to subvert an incoming presidential administration based on complete lies and nonsense. They just made it up. It was like Dungeons and Dragons for morally superior liberal Democrats. He's already blaming Obama. What do you think is in 2019, long before Kash Patel, John Radcliffe, Pam Bondi, if he was blaming President Obama in 2019, what do you think he's going to do on the witness stand or in a criminal trial? And he'll almost certainly get indicted also. They're all going to blame President Obama. Check it out again.
The reporting we had on the Russian interference, and which we did. And then, of course, on January 6th, we issued our intelligence community assessment documenting the Russian interference, in which we had very high confidence in the evidence. Our intelligence community. And then, of course, on January, together all the part of the group
that those officials have said they had great confidence in.
John Brennan and Jim Comey and I are part of the group that were tasked by President Obama to put together all the reporting we had on the Russian interference, and which we did. And then, of course, on January 6th, we issued our intelligence community assessment documenting the Russian interference, in which we had very high confidence in the evidence that we presented.
Also,
they were tasked by President Obama. It was an official, they were tasked by the president. The president told them to investigate Trump because of his ties to Russia, which were non-existent. There was zero reason anyway why Russia would want Trump, especially since the Clinton campaign literally wanted to elevate Trump. It's in their own emails. So all the people who still believe the Russia hoax, how on earth could you explain the Clinton campaign emails that The Guardian, that the New York Times, the Washington Post, WikiLeaks published? How on earth could you explain that both the Russians and Hillary Clinton's own campaign wanted to elevate Trump? And within those emails was Ben Carson and Ted Cruz as well, because they thought that Trump and Ted Cruz and Dr. Ben Carson were too extreme for the electorate. Okay? Furthermore, I don't think the Russians are too afraid of Biden. They invaded under Biden, largest invasion in generations under Democrats. Okay, so, and then private servers with top secret intelligence on them. I mean, my God. So I don't think they were too afraid. But the Democrats blame that country for everything. They stubbed their toe. Oh my God, it's them again. This is going to lead to indictments, not only because President Obama will circumvent criminal liability. I think that he's almost certainly helping President Trump. He circumvents any criminal liability and he takes over completely the Democratic Party. But the indictment will not allow these individuals to blame anyone else for their crimes. They're already blaming Obama, and it's like, well, when they get indicted on their conspiracy statutes, they can't just simply blame the president.
Also teeing up that there will be more declassified documents coming this week. Ahead of that, here's what we've learned so far. December 7th, 2016, the assessment reiterated that Russia did not tamper with election infrastructure. Just one day later, the editor of that assessment canceled the brief, quote, based on new guidance. By December 9th, 2016, Obama convened National Security Council principals and ordered a new assessment. And on January 6, 2017, the new unclassified assessment was released. Obama's office today firing back, issuing the following statement. Out of respect for the office of the presidency, our office does not normally dignify the constant nonsense and misinformation flowing out of this White House with a response. But these claims are outrageous enough to merit one. These bizarre allegations are ridiculous and a weak attempt at distraction. Nothing in the document issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia.
Everything in those documents undercuts the not widely accepted only by people who committed crimes, There were only certain people that had high confidence, Brennan being one of them. And the high confidence assessment should never have been, first of all, it was a confidence assessment. There was no evidence. He stated that he had no evidence under oath. But the whole thing was a setup. They framed and set up President Trump. And again, President Obama is not at risk of indictment. Everyone who set Trump up and framed Trump with the dossier. The dossier was a criminal act. It was a criminal act to purchase the Steele dossier and filter it through the U.S. government.
Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election, but did not successfully manipulate any votes. These findings were affirmed in a 2020 report by the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee, led by then-Chairman Marco Rubio. Joining me now to react is the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Director Gabbard, give me your response to what we heard from former President Obama there. He's saying that none of this makes any sense, that this is a distraction. What do you say to that?
It's the art of deflection coming from former President Obama, as well as his friends who are still in Congress today, and Senator Warner and Congressman Jim Himes, really all basically saying that exact same statement, which doesn't actually address the issue that was revealed in great detail in the over 100 documents that we released last week, and the documents that we will be releasing later this week, that point to the undeniable fact that you laid out in your introduction to this segment, is that the intelligence community had one assessment, that Russia did not have the intent or capability to try to impact the outcome of the U.S. election leading up to Election Day. The same assessment was made after Donald Trump was elected by the American people as president in 2016, defeating Hillary Clinton. And it wasn't until after that pulled President's Daily Brief document that you referenced that the Principals Committee was called in the National Security Council. And President Obama then directed Obama's DNI James Clapper to lead the effort to create this new intelligence community assessment that detailed not if, but how Moscow attempted to influence the outcome of the U.S. election. So this is the thing that I think people should pay attention to, is neither the message from President Obama's office, neither the statements coming from Democrats in Congress today and their friends in the propaganda media. None of them are addressing this fact that there was a shift, a 180-degree shift from the intelligence community's assessment leading up to the election to the one that President Obama directed be produced after Donald Trump won the election, that completely contradicted those assessments that had come previously. The second thing I want to address that's very important, Laura, is that you in the clip that you played, you saw John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey stated with high confidence this January intelligence community assessment that they drafted at the direction of President Obama. The fact is that they used already discredited information like the Steele dossier. They knew it was discredited at that time, yet they used it as a source for this document that they claim to have high confidence in. They used intelligence that some of these intelligence community professionals rejected previously because of the lack of credibility and the lack of the ability to vet with any kind of confidence whether or not that information or intelligence was accurate and could.
The entire Trump-Russia narrative is that, well, intel agencies said that they had something on Trump. But that's undercut by the reality. Initially, they found nothing. They found no evidence. In fact, the investigation was full of exculpatory statements and claims and evidence. There was no link to Trump and Russia. Zero. They fabricated everything. And the really sad and insidious part of all of this is that you still have millions of people who think Hillary Clinton lost because Russia wanted Trump. They don't know that Hillary Clinton's campaign emails literally state that they wanted Trump themselves. Then they lost. So everyone, when I was writing in the Huffington Post, the Hill, Salon, other publications, I told the world Hillary Clinton would lose. Nobody believed me. It was like on YouTube, there's only two people. It was me and Styx Exenhammer. We were the only people telling the world, hey, Hillary's going to lose. All the smartest people in the world said, oh, well, she's going to win in a landslide. Then Clinton lost. Then the plan was to say that Russia wanted Trump. But why would Russia want Trump? They invaded under Biden, and wouldn't they want servers? There's zero reason. Democrats do not strike fear into any adversary. The only thing Democrats strike fear within are corporations that are leaving New York. Business is petrified of Democrats. That business, commerce, corporations, capitalism, they're petrified of Democrats. Russia, not so much.
Could be used for an assessment. There's a long laundry list of facts and intelligence reporting that directly contradict the statement coming from President Obama's office and those who are trying to deflect away from what actually happened, which was after Donald Trump was elected. Led by President Obama, there was an effort to create a document that would serve as a foundation for what would be a years-long coup against President Trump, therefore trying to subvert the will of the American people who sent him to the White House in 2016.
Well, it's amazing that you are now releasing all of this. And Tulsi, I have to tell you, for those of us who lived through it, thank you. I think it's great that we're getting this information out. You say there is more information, there are more documents to be released. Anything you can tell us on that?
We will be releasing these documents shortly in the wake of the release that we did last week. I'm very encouraged by the fact that we have whistleblowers coming forward who are intelligence community professionals who were there when this happened and who were disgusted by it and are heartened at the possibility and the hope that the truth will see the light of day. And of course, the most important thing is that the American people see accountability, which is why we're referring and have already sent all of the documents that we have currently and any
relating to an alleged conspiracy to tie then 2016 candidate Donald Trump to the country of Russia. Now, Fox News reviewed the one-page order just hours ago signed by the Attorney General. A source familiar with the probe confirms this as well, while a DOJ spokesperson declined to comment on this report of an investigation. Fox is told Attorney General Bondi is taking the referrals from Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, quote, very seriously. The spokesperson says that Bondi believes there is, quote, clear cause for deep concern, end quote, and a need for the next steps. Now, this move comes just a couple of weeks after the Director of National Intelligence, you see her right there, Tulsi Gabbard, sent a criminal referral to the Justice Department regarding what she says proves there was a conspiracy to undermine Trump's candidacy and later his first term in office. Now, to be clear today, there are no charges that have been filed, no indictments. This is incredibly early in the process. What we have here is...
So this reporting is 3 months ago, but it highlights the fact that there is a grand jury probe, numerous ones, especially one for that links directly to conspiracy statutes. People conspired, and that's what took place.
Taking evidence the Justice Department believes it has to a grand jury to secure an eventual indictment or indictments. We don't know exactly where the grand jury will meet. We don't know who will go before the grand jury. And that's by design, because grand juries determine if there's enough evidence to indict, and grand juries are secretive in the American legal system, so it's normal not to know all of the answers. Again, the DOJ declining on any comment regarding this investigation. But, Will, big news, this was signed by the Attorney General Pam Bondi today to take this evidence of an alleged conspiracy to a grand jury with the hope to get an indictment or multiple indictments.
And these grand juries and in the jury pool for the next trials for Brennan, Clinton, and others, they won't be asked, well, do you watch CNN? Because that's unbiased and it's apolitical. So in the the trials that took place before President Trump pertaining to the Steele dossier or the Durham probe, John Durham deserves the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But a couple of the trials, the fix was in. And what he did was uncover a boatload, a ton of evidence for future criminal prosecutions. And also Clinton and Brennan almost certainly perjured themselves during the Durham probe investigation because they were both had to testify under oath during the John Durham probe. However, a lot of these juries, they were asked, well, or I think even in the New York jury for the conviction that it'll be overturned, the hush money conviction, they were asked, well, what sources of news do you watch? Oh, I read the New York Times and CNN. Oh, okay, those are apolitical. Those are nonpartisan. Those are just reputable. It's like, for these juries, almost certainly they're not going to be like, oh, you watch CNN and MSNBC and you read the New York Times and you go to bed with Jimmy Kimmel at night? Maybe you shouldn't be on the jury pool.
Well,
that is big news, David, and congratulations to you. Excellent reporting on being first on this order signed today by Attorney General Pam Bondi. I understand it is a one-page order, which you have been able to review. Fox News has been able to review. I'm afraid I'm going to ask you some questions that need to be asked, but we won't yet know the answer. So let's start with the one that everyone watching at home is interested in. Who or what names might be the target of this grand jury?
Well, that's a great point. We don't know. We know that Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, has mentioned the names John Brennan, the former CIA director, James Clapper, who had the job before her. But I want to be very clear on the air. We don't know if their names are going before the grand jury for any.
So as of the past couple of days, Brennan is about to get indicted, which will lead directly to Clinton getting indicted.
Anybody that has, talked about former President Barack Obama seeing charges, we're told by multiple law enforcement sources that's not going to happen because of the immunity that he enjoys as a former president because of the Supreme Court decision last year that came to actually benefit current President Trump. So while we don't know the names, we know that those are possible names, and we know the Justice Department is serious enough and believes that it has enough evidence to take this to a grand jury. If I may just add in here, a few weeks ago, the Attorney General announced a strike force to go through some of these documents, and within a couple of weeks feels that she has enough evidence to go forward to this grand jury. So it directs an unnamed federal prosecutor to take this evidence to a grand jury, but the name of that federal prosecutor not clear at this moment.
Okay, just a couple more quick questions, David.
Sure.
Sorry to push the limits of your knowledge, but I want to make sure that we address all the things that are not only in your report, but in everyone's mind as well. The name, as well, in addition to Clapper and Brennan, that people will be wondering about will be Hillary Clinton. I understand yet we do not yet have those names. We'll be waiting to hear what names.
By the way, Hillary Clinton's going to get indicted, and she'll run for president, and every socialist in New York or Seattle will vote for Hillary Clinton. The Democrats work in the following manner. They elect socialists in very blue cities where there's a political machine, or where there's, the majority extremely liberal or progressive. Okay. And then those socialists will walk in lockstep and do what they're told and vote for Hillary Clinton. She will run again, convicted, indicted for sure. And then even if, it take years to convict, she could be convicted, and every socialist will still vote for her. They'd vote for Liz Cheney. If Liz Cheney was the Democratic nominee, every Democratic socialist would vote for Liz Cheney. Otherwise, they'd lose their friends, their social network, family members. If you don't vote for the Democratic nominee, I don't care if you're a communist. I don't care if you have a Che Guevara tattoo all over your body. If you don't vote for the Democratic nominee, you will be excommunicated from polite and civil and wonderful, morally superior, liberal or progressive or leftist societies, or social groups. So the way it works is that Hillary Clinton will be indicted. It's taken 10 years. I've been saying this for about 10 years. But she'll run again for president. And I'll be right about that also. And they'll vote for her. Mamdani, the best. I pray to God that when Clinton gets indicted, not only does she run, but when she runs for president, that she gets a big endorsement from Zoran Mamdani. It will be that'll definitely happen. They pick Clinton as nominee, and then Zoran Mamdani endorses her. The stars will, it'll be like a Matrix moment.
Are in that referral to a grand jury. The next thing everyone will want to know, David, is what are the potential charges?
Well, the potential charges, and I want to use the word potential, would be lying to a federal official, which is a felony to do so. If you lie to an FBI agent or you lie to another federal official, there could be charges involved with there, and I'm told those could be the most likely. That's something that we saw in the John Durham investigation. He was the former special counsel that was appointed by then Attorney General Bill Barr, and those are the types of charges that he used in his cases. He actually lost both times in court, but he did secure a plea deal with a former FBI attorney for falsifying a document. So those seem to be, or that seems to be, when I say those, I should say that because that's just one charge. But that's the charge in talking to sources that people have been eyeing for weeks. But this letter, this initial letter signed by the Attorney General that we reviewed, does not say anything about specific charges. It just directs an unnamed prosecutor, hey, you have jurisdiction that's out of your normal jurisdiction. You can go anywhere in the United States and you could bring this evidence before a grand jury.
And a grand jury will come back with formal charges, a formal indictment. But a prosecutor, whoever that may be, as you point out, can and should make suggestions to a grand jury on which way they decide the evidence points. Ultimately, they decide whether or not there's probable cause for an indictment. Last question for you, David.
Sure.
The one-page order, which you have reviewed, suggests it is an unnamed prosecutor, but it seemed to open up, and I'm listening to you intently here, it seemed to open up potential jurisdiction to anywhere that seems appropriate to that prosecutor. So I take it this doesn't necessarily mean it would be in Washington, D.C., not necessarily in New York, potentially could be filed charges anywhere in the United States.
Yeah, that's what we're told. We're told that the Attorney General has the ability to confer that ability on any everyday federal prosecutor to give that jurisdiction to sort of widen out for the entire United States.
Now, could you imagine how many people involved in the Steele dossier, in working with Brennan and Comey and Clapper and all of these people and Hillary Clinton, and now anywhere in the United States, you have prosecutors able to level charges on RICO or conspiracy statutes? That's unbelievable that we've come this far. It's taken a decade, but.
And we're being told that this is not a special prosecutor or a special counsel, as we saw with Jack Smith and John Durham and Robert Hur. We're told this is just a federal prosecutor that is being given this temporary jurisdiction to take this before a grand jury. But at this point, it's not being referred to as a special counsel.
Just to complete the OCD of my curiosity, David, we've covered.
Thank goodness it's not a special counsel. You don't need the collection of evidence. You don't need a special counsel. You have Kash Patel, you have John Ratcliffe, you have Tulsi Gabbard. They're collecting the evidence. You needed a special counsel when you had people running these departments, these agencies that didn't want to give the evidence. That's when you need a special counsel, not now.
Who, what, and where. I am compelled to ask you then when. Any sense of timeline on this grand jury?
I'm told that it could be months before anything actually happens as far as seeing any sort of results from the grand jury. It's not clear how long grand juries sit in each different jurisdiction. They're impaneled for different amounts of times. I've covered cases before where one grand jury hears some evidence and they're just getting ready to say, we're going to indict, and then their term and their service is over, so another grand jury comes in. I think that in speaking to the people we spoke to, they want to move quickly on this, but it all depends on what the grand jury wants to do and the amount of evidence. But I'm told that any indictments, I want to be clear, if there are indictments, because grand juries can come back and say, we don't think there's enough evidence for indictments, that may take a little while.
Okay, David Spunt, excellent.
He votes. President Trump says Obama should be the main focus of a DOJ investigation.
Again, that's the art of the deal. There's zero chance that President Obama will be indicted. Zero. There's a 99.9, almost virtually 100% chance that Brennan, well, that's going to take place in the next couple of weeks or this week. But John O'Brien will be indicted for lying during the Durham probe or about the 51 intel officials, and then indicted again. These people will face numerous indictments. Perjury, and then the conspiracy statutes. So there's different grand juries involved. But it's President Obama does not risk indictment. Clinton, almost 100%, will be indicted. Like I said, she'll run for president again, and Zoran Mamdani will back her. Nobody ever thought the past 10 years would work out in the manner that it has, and I have been telling you it's going to be exactly this way. It took a while, but it's taking place. If you watch this channel, you know that I've been spot on pretty much. Hit subscribe if you're new and go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right after this to my super chat. Thank you. If you've been around for years watching and reading my writing, you can go to hagoodman.com. You could read my writing in The Hill, The Huffington Post, Salon, The Federalist, other publications. You know that I have been pretty much telling you this was going to happen for a long time.
Along with a group of former high-level officials who also played a part. Watch.
It would be President Obama. He started it. And Biden was there with him. And Comey was there. And Clapper. The whole group was there. Brennan. They were all there in a room. Right here. This was the room. But the leader of the gang was President Obama. Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of him? Look, he's guilty. It's not a question. I like to say, let's give it time. It's there. He's guilty. This was treason, and we have all of the documents. And from what Tulsi told me, she's got thousands of additional documents coming. So President Obama, it was his concept, his idea, but he also got it from crooked Hillary Clinton. Crooked is a $3 bill. Hillary Clinton.
Crooked is a $3 bill.
And her group, the Democrats, spent $12 million to Christopher Steele to write up a report that was a total fake report.
Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard told me on Sunday that more documents are coming out, and they will be out today. They fly in the face of the Obama statement. Joining me now is former federal prosecutor, former DHS Deputy Assistant Secretary, Jonathan Fahey. Jonathan, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, everybody on this program and our audience knows that we pegged this hoax from the start. I've been calling it out for years. What is your reaction now?
How could anyone have believed that Russia was afraid of Democrats? Why would they? Because of NATO? No, they don't care. They don't care about anything. Why would they be afraid of Hillary or Biden? President Obama ran on a Russian reset. The hawks against Russia were McCain and Romney, not the Democrats. The whole thing, you'd have to be ignorant of modern U.S. history to think that the Democrats were the ones who were the hawks. This is not true. Or at least, I mean, they were in terms of major wars, yes, alongside Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld, but they were not against Russia.
Now that we see these declassified documents coming out, revealing what we all expected.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And the fact that there's still, things are still coming out now showing this is also amazing that it's taken this long. But what it really does show is that, the apparatus, the establishment apparatus and the Democratic Party did everything they could to undermine President Trump's candidacy and also his presidency. And, President Trump talked about the Steele dossier, which was the impetus for a lot of this stuff, was paid for by the Clinton campaign. And remember, they marked it as a legal expense, something that they later say, when Donald Trump marks something a legal expense, it's a major investigation. All of this stinks. And what's interesting about Obama's statement, he doesn't address the fact that Democrats were campaigning on this in 2018, including himself talking about, Russian interference and keeping our elections safe, when they knew the Russians didn't do anything more than they ordinarily did in elections, but they wanted people to think that the Russians not only interfered but changed vote outcomes and things like that, which was, they never had evidence of that, but they wanted the American people to think that, so they always insinuated that, and they use these terms like meddling and colluding, which aren't even legal terms. It's like they just constantly, it was this
That's why there's been a warfare. There's been a semantic warfare the past decade. Collusion, meddling, interference. What else? He dined with this person. All of these. He emboldened. Trump emboldens the bad people. All of these vague, broad, ambiguous terms that they're like Pavlovian for the morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrats. They get a Pavlovian response. He emboldened? He colluded? He meddled? He interfered? Oh my God. Save us from this man.
Constant drumbeat and really undermine their Trump presidency, Trump 45 presidency in so many ways. It's so disgraceful. President Obama would be far better off to take a little humility and say, hey, there were a lot of mistakes made during our presidency, and the Democratic Party can learn a lot from that. But instead, they're almost doubling down because Donald Trump was never in their club, never in the establishment, and they did everything they could to delegitimize him at every step from the campaign to his presidency.
Well, that's right. And remember, at the time, Donald Trump was saying a lot about the need to drain the swamp, change the way Washington worked, and they didn't like that at all. They wanted to hold on to their grip on power. But where do you see the criminality? Because this is going to be a criminal investigation. And back then in 2016 and 2017, I was having Devin Nunes on repeatedly when he was the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. And of course, if you're the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, you see things that others may not. That's why when Adam Schiff came out and said that there was collusion in plain sight when he became the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, people stood up and took notice. But he could not have had any information that showed that there was collusion in plain sight, because we know that he saw what Devin Nunes saw. So was he lying? Did he lie to Congress? Is that a felony? Or, because he's a lawmaker.
What can
have, to be under oath in that way. The same thing with that meeting in early January in President Obama's office, when we know that John Brennan had handwritten notes, and the handwritten notes said that Russia is aware that Hillary Clinton came up with this story that Trump colluded with Russia. He's got all these handwritten notes that we had at the time that I showed on television. Did Brennan lie to Congress? Is that where the criminality is? Where do you see the criminality? And would you expect indictments at the highest order here?
That's where I think you're right. I think where they're going to probably, if there are charges or an investigation, would be things like false statements under oath to Congress, where if you have, evidence that he said one thing and knew one thing here and then goes to Congress and says something else, it's a pretty clean, I don't want to say easily provable, because all these cases end up not being easily provable, but that is sort of a provable type of thing, a perjury, a false statement. Other types of things, are they conspiring to defraud the American people, and other types of things with this information? I think that's more and more complicated. And as you get into that, you get into the issues of immunity and things like that. But I do think things like the false statements, if they are provable, those are the types of things I think that will be investigated further. And it is important to know when something's referred to DOJ, it doesn't necessarily mean it will ultimately result in convictions or charges. It may just mean further investigations, because the agency that has the information doesn't have the ability to investigate or charge. So we don't really know, but I think it's going to be, they're going to dig deeper, probably talk to, interview people, put people under oath, and see where it goes. But it looks really, really bad. Yeah. And you're right. It was all about protecting the fourth state, the bureaucracy. Yeah.
So it was bureaucracy that they utilized against President Trump. This is a huge scandal, ladies and gentlemen. It's this and the auto pen are the two biggest scandals in U.S. history. You couldn't even make any of these things up. Clinton purchases a dossier to set up and frame an incoming president, and then Biden is forced out by his own political parties because of cognitive issues, but then pardons the world, and then the pardons are unconstitutional. Check this out.
Joining us now to expand is editor-in-chief of Racket News. You get him on Substack and everywhere else. His podcast is great. Matt Taibbi. Matt, I'm not saying they should be so nice to Trump. He doesn't walk on water. But can we expect some fairness the second time around?
No, absolutely not. I mean, one of the problems is that the press has covered Trump in a way that has left them no ability to cover him objectively without admitting massive previous failures and corruption, specifically with all of the stuff that's come out about Russiagate and some other scandals.
Yeah, let's talk about Russiagate. You said in your latest column on Racket News, you said you were reluctant to dive into the so-called conspiracy. What changed for you? Was it something in the Durham Annex and the whistleblowers over the last week?
Yeah, I mean, I've been covering this story for 8 years, and I started out just saying something seemed wrong with the reporting, like the sourcing was bad. And I thought it was a story about a thin investigation that wasn't supported well enough. And I was very reluctant to go to this place that this was a conspiracy to cover up something that Hillary Clinton had done. But the Durham report really leaves no doubt anymore that
So Matt Taibbi is a wonderful journalist. He's fantastic. And the Durham report, the Durham Annex, points to the Durham Annex actually has, and we looked at it on this channel during the live stream, emails, notes between Clinton's campaign and others setting up and framing Trump. And then you have the ODNI declassified information where Brennan lied to Congress, where Brennan overruled CIA officials. So this is not difficult to prove in a court of law. All of this will lead to indictments. Like I said, Hillary Clinton will eventually be indicted. She'll run for president again, and Zoran Mamdani almost certainly will endorse her. Every socialist is voting for Hillary Clinton when she runs after indictment. I know that sounds completely nutty, but that's the trajectory of what's taking place.
the Clinton campaign had a plan in place to blame Trump on with something related to Russia even before the WikiLeaks stuff came out. So the administration that the investigation that followed was just incidental, and that's pretty well demonstrated by what happened in the report.
And the thing is, now you have this guy Leonardo Bernardo, a name with George Soros's Open Society. Jeff Goldstein, dealing with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, back and forth and finding a way to change the narrative from Hillary's emails and the John Podesta hacking to Donald Trump in bed with Vladimir Putin to hopefully win the election and later to destroy his first term when he won.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable, because the real story here is that Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server opened up the United States to an unprecedented security risk. And the Russian government actually came into possession of a huge cache of material, correspondence all the way up to the president's office. And yet, in order to deflect from that, they had to create some kind of story that was similar.
So, like Comey, one of the few things he kind of told the truth about, Clinton's emails were obtained by every adversary, almost certainly. And like you just heard now, our greatest adversary obtained a whole bunch, if not all of, this is 2009 technology, using BlackBerry cell phones, even technology today. If you had private servers, how did Hillary Clinton's team transfer top secret and special access program intelligence from secure government networks onto her BlackBerry phone? It's impossible to do from a cybersecurity perspective, but Inspector Clouseau, James Comey, said, well, I couldn't find intent. But of course there's intent inherent in owning. These are the people who are supposed to protect us from the bad guys, okay? Inherent in owning private servers is the intent to hide. This is not rocket science, but how did they transfer classified data onto those servers? It's impossible to do so, and it's not only illegal, it's impossible from a cybersecurity perspective, and nobody ever asked.
Explosive. So they came up with this idea of linking and vilifying Trump and Putin together. They talked about it being a long-term project to demonize them both. And that's what they did. And what's so remarkable is that every single major media reporter in America went along with this, this station excluded, obviously.
Matt, if it wasn't for a compliant media, it wouldn't have worked. It would have been a bunch of intelligence officials making statements. But the media was stenographers for this.
That's why nobody trusts media. 70% of Americans do not trust media, and it's because they were told that Trump worked with Russia, and Hillary lost because Trump worked with Russia. If anything, Comey's letter, after testifying that Uma Abedin was forwarding classified data to Anthony Weiner, okay, whose laptop you couldn't even touch with a hazmat suit, that was the reason he wrote the Comey letter, James Comey, okay. He testified he wrote the Comey letter because of that. Again, this is all absurd nonsense. It was a cover-up. Then Comey, for some reason, wanted to tell Hillary Clinton, oh, I have the goods on you. So Comey basically did that, wrote the Comey letter, completely undercut Clinton's campaign. God forbid she could have won. She probably could have won had it not been for Comey. Probably. Because she had just enough momentum to withstand President Trump's momentum. Okay, but I knew that something outlandish would take place because there was so much cover-up. There's so much scandal and corruption. So I said Clinton would lose. Nobody believed it. But she lost. Then you had the Jacob Javits Center, and people are crying and everything. And it was like a terrible thing. It was like the generation before us, the biggest calamity that Americans face was the Great Depression. Okay? People grew up without food in this country, and it was the biggest calamity. The greatest calamity was Trump winning in the past 10 years. Okay? You've gone from a generation that survived the Great Depression to a generation that thinks a generation of liberal, wonderful, morally superior liberal Democrats who think they survived Trump. It's like, well, that's not really... We've really changed in terms of how we view history as a country. But anyway, let's continue.
This story, and it ruins people's lives. Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, solitary confinement. They almost arrested Jared Kushner. This goes all the way through, but a lot of people are saying we've been through this. What's different is in this annex, in these burn bags that were found in the FBI. But the New York Times on Friday comes out and just show this headline, because you tackle this in your column. They basically say, could it be that the information that Matt Taibbi and Brian Kilmeade are talking about right now is Russian disinformation, and it wasn't them? So if you could stay with this, can you buy that? Do you think the Russians are duping us?
The Russians are actually going back in time. They're so ingenious. They were afraid of Democrats, and they're the ones who wrote Clinton's emails that said that she wanted Trump before she lost. And they're the ones who put all those photos and videos and the bribery and graft schemes in Hunter's laptop. They're the ones who did all of these things, knowing very well that the American public would see corruption within the Democratic Party. And the more corruption and criminality they see within Democrats, the more that they would vote for Trump. You see how ingenious they are? So what they did was inform the entire planet that Hillary Clinton had servers with top secret intelligence on them. And then the Russians informed us that Hunter's laptop was full of bribery and graft, leading to Biden. And then the Russians probably want us to know that the auto pen was unconstitutional. They're everywhere. And now, we're finding out that there was an elaborate plot, a conspiracy, to set up and frame Trump with a Steele dossier that Clinton purchased and paid an FEC fine for. But that's the Russians. Don't you see? Yet again, they're trying to convince us that everything we're finding out is actually pointing back to Clinton and a diabolical plot by Democrats to set up and frame Trump, which is exactly what the Russians want you to think.
No, there's no question that they had an enormous amount of material. It was taken seriously enough by James Comey that he moved up the date of his announcement of the end of Hillary Clinton's email investigation. And the denials that the New York Times is writing about today, and I'm just so exhausted by this process, Brian.
I know.
Every time they come out with some new cockamamie thing, and we have to take time to knock it all down again, and eventually it's admitted later. But these are non-denial denials. They talk about it being put together by spies, and the people who are mentioned in the story, they say they don't recall it happening. But if you actually look at what they say in these interviews, they say things like, yeah, I don't remember doing that, but it's possible that I proposed that kind of plan, and it's possible that if I proposed it, it would have been accepted by the campaign. It's embarrassing.
Lastly, in the conclusion, people want to see some type of consequences for this unsavory action. If we talk about consequences, note there's a statute of limitations. What do you expect?
Well, one thing about statute of limitations, there is no statute of limitations for conspiracy statutes until the conspiracy ends. And they're continuing it. This is John Ratcliffe, the CIA chief. We went from Brennan to John Ratcliffe. Think about that.
Director John Lee Ratcliffe worked on this in Congress and again as DNI and joins us now. Welcome, Director. I sat beside you as Comey and Brennan were questioned for hours about Russia collusion. They never once mentioned this was a Clinton campaign plan. They knew it. They were co-conspirators. Would this ever have come out had you not declassified Brennan's notes and then Durham's annex? And for our viewers, what's new in the Durham annex?
Well, Trey, think about that there was intelligence from foreign intelligence services that one U.S. presidential candidate was trying to frame another candidate for treason. Claiming that he was an agent of a foreign power, an agent of Russia. And that intelligence was never shared with you or I as members of congressional oversight committees on intelligence. But for the good fortune of me being able to find John Brennan's notes and declassify that secret may have been hidden forever, but I was able to provide that to John Durham, and you see some of that in his annex that was declassified this week. And so what you learned in this annex that many people didn't know before was details of that Hillary Clinton plan and how it included groups like the Soros Foundation and the role that the FBI played. So before all of this started, Trey, what we did know was this, that on July 31st of 2016, the FBI did something as shocking as it was unprecedented. They opened a criminal investigation into a nominee for president, a candidate for President Donald Trump, something that had never been done before. But what you learned in John Brennan's annex this week was 6 days before that, Russian intelligence predicted that's exactly what would happen, that there was a Hillary Clinton plan and that the FBI would pour oil on the fire of a firestorm that would consume the country for the next 3 years. So think about that, Trey. Either the Russians made the greatest prediction or the luckiest guess of all time, or this intelligence was real. And of course, the answer is this intelligence was real. And how do we know that? Well, subsequently, under penalty of perjury, while under oath, Hillary Clinton's own campaign manager confirmed that there was such a plan and that Hillary approved it. So that, I think, in addition to what you learn about the FBI's role that came out this week, was that this intelligence that was so shocking that John Brennan brought together the National Security Council, President Obama, Vice President Biden, Clapper, Comey, Susan Rice, and briefed them on this intelligence about a Hillary Clinton plan to frame Donald Trump, and that the CIA made the required referral of that to the FBI to investigate that as a counterintelligence matter. And as John Durham found, the FBI buried it. They didn't open a file. They didn't assign an analyst. They didn't investigate it all. They just spent the next few years, really, amplifying the lie of Hillary Clinton's Steele dossier and burying the truth of her plan to frame Donald Trump. It is the greatest political scandal that we hopefully will be the last that we'll see in our lifetime.
speaking of amplify, Director, I want you to amplify a point that you just made, because you and I both know John Brennan, the New York Times, they're still in denial. They're claiming that none of this has been verified.
Well, they have to, Trey. They have to, because to do otherwise would be to confess their guilt. My critics in this regard, Brennan and Comey and Clapper, they said I was wrong about there was no Russia collusion. They said I was wrong that Hunter Biden's laptop was real. Of course I was right. I was telling the truth. Our intelligence reflected that, and the same is true here. This intelligence is real. And for Comey and Brennan and Clapper to say otherwise would be to confess their guilt, to say that they gave false testimony, that they misled Congress, that they obstructed justice. So they have to put up these straw man arguments saying, well, we stand by our assessment that Russia meddled in the 2016. Well, that wasn't their argument. Their argument was that this was unprecedented, that Donald Trump was potentially committing treason, that he was an agent of a foreign power. And so, they have to take that point. And to the point of the New York Times and the Washington Post, the same thing. They don't want to admit that they wrote thousands of false stories. So they don't want to give back the Pulitzer Prizes that they gained for writing those false stories. So they're doing it to do anything other than to try and fight this and say that it's not real would be to admit their guilt, to admit they were wrong, and to admit that they deliberately misled the American people, which is exactly what they did.
So this is Tulsi Gabbard directly implicating Hillary Clinton in a criminal conspiracy. This is amazing right here.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. At President Trump's direction and with the support and coordination with the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Rick Crawford, today we've released a declassified Oversight Majority Staff report that was produced in September of 2020. The stunning revelations that we are releasing today should be of concern to every American. This is not about Democrats or Republicans. This has to do with the integrity of our democratic republic and American voters having faith that the votes cast will count. There is irrefutable evidence that detail how President Obama and his national security team directed the creation of an intelligence community assessment that they knew was false. They knew it would promote this contrived narrative that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help President Trump win, selling it to the American people as though it were true.
Is this Slurpee time, y'all?
Wasn't. The report that we released today shows in great detail how they carried this out. They manufactured findings from shoddy sources. They suppressed evidence and credible intelligence that disproved their false claims. They disobeyed traditional tradecraft intelligence community standards and withheld the truth from the American people. In doing so, they conspired to subvert the will of the American people who elected Donald Trump in that election in November of 2016. They worked with their partners in the media to promote this lie, ultimately to undermine the legitimacy of President Trump and launching what would be a years-long coup against him and his administration. We're here today because the American people deserve the truth, they deserve accountability, and they deserve justice. The records that we released on Friday that were ODNI records, Senator Chuck Grassley's release on Monday of what is known as the Clinton Annex, which was an appendix to the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General's 2018 report, as well as the House Intelligence Committee's majority oversight report that we're releasing today, all come back to and confirm the same report. There was a gross politicization and manipulation of intelligence by the Obama administration intended to delegitimize President Trump even before he was inaugurated, ultimately usurping the will of the American people. I'm going to go over the key findings from the House Intelligence report, which investigated the claims that were made by an intelligence community assessment ordered by President Obama and published in January of 2017. First, Putin's principal interests relating to the 2016 election were to undermine faith in the U.S. democratic process, not show any preference of a certain candidate. In fact, this report shows Putin held back from leaking compromising material on Hillary Clinton prior to the election, instead planning to release it after the election to weaken what Moscow viewed as an inevitable Clinton presidency. In the January 2017 intelligence community assessment that President Obama ordered, John Brennan, who was CIA director at the time, and the intelligence community intentionally suppressed intelligence that showed Putin was saving the most damaging material that he had in his possession about Hillary Clinton until after her potential and likely victory. The report goes into great detail about the information that Russia and Putin had on Hillary Clinton, which included possible criminal acts like secret meetings with multiple named U.S. religious organizations in which State Department officials offered, in exchange for supporting Secretary Clinton's campaign for the presidency, significant increases in financing from the State Department. They also had documents that showed the patronage of the State Department to State Department employees who would go and support Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. There were high-level DNC emails that detailed evidence of Hillary's, quote, psycho-emotional problems, uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness, and that then Secretary Clinton was allegedly on a daily regimen of heavy tranquilizers. Then CIA Director Brennan and the intelligence community mischaracterized intelligence and relied on dubious substandard sources to create a contrived false narrative that Putin developed a quote-unquote clear preference for Trump. Brennan and the IC misled lawmakers by referencing the debunked Steele dossier to assess quote-unquote Russia's plans and intentions, falsely suggesting that this dossier had intelligence value when he knew that it was discredited. The intelligence community excluded significant intelligence and ignored or selectively quoted reliable intelligence that contradicted the intelligence community assessment's key findings on Putin's alleged support for Trump. Including this intelligence reporting would have exposed the ICA's claim as implausible, if not ridiculous.
If they had used the original intelligence, Brennan and Clapper and Hillary and Clinton and Comey, all of them, their propaganda, their lies about Trump and Russia would have been viewed as completely implausible, outlandish. God bless Tulsi Gabbard. Ladies and gentlemen, The Independent, John Ratcliffe suggests Hillary Clinton could face criminal prosecution. I've been right so far the past 10 years. I said President Trump would win. I was saying President Trump would become president again, the second Biden one. And I was telling you that Clinton would lose to Trump. I've been telling you that Clinton would be indicted eventually, along with all of these people, for a long time. When she is indicted, she'll run for president. The Democrats will likely nominate her. And Zoran Mamdani will back her. And vote, and every socialist will vote for Hillary Clinton. Or they could just, decide on Liz Cheney, and every socialist will vote for Liz Cheney. That's how the Democrats work. They're morally superior and wonderful. Hit subscribe. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel in like 30 seconds. There will be an upload, a synopsis of all of this. Hit subscribe, everybody. God bless you. I'll be back tonight about 8 p.m.